Okay. What is the one constant in life?
Change.
Well, that was easy. Yes, it's change. We had an example of that last week with the change in the bylaws, major change. I spoke with someone recently and I said, so, what do you think of the new bylaws? I dislike them. Well, what did you think of the old bylaws? I disliked them, but I disliked them less. We've all gone through many changes in our lives. I had a major one in school. I had always been figuring that I was going to become a pilot. And the best way to become a pilot, you can't just walk to an airline and say, hi, can I fly one of your planes? It's like, no. Do you know how to do that? So I was going to join the Air Force. Now, when I was in college, I was going into college, I was way up at the top in math. And so it's like, all right, I'm going to major in math. My first semester of calculus and analytic geometry, if anyone here has taken it, it's so much fun. I got a really good grade in it. And then when I got to my second semester, I and a few others were very confused because that teacher said, okay, turn to page 583. And he said, wait, we're only up to page 325. It's like, oh, your teacher didn't teach the whole course. So you have two choices. You can either sit in on a class and, for that first semester and do that all over again, or you can just see if you can do it with the second semester. So I decided, let's just forge ahead with the second semester, and I got a really lousy grade. I passed, but it was one of those things where, okay, this really isn't going to work. I'm now going to basically be a year behind if I say I'm going to have to start all over again. So instead of majoring in math, I ended up, with a couple of changes later, getting a degree in theater. Well, the choice was, do I want a degree in theater or do I want a degree in Russian? And I decided that neither one of them was going to really help me get another job, but theater was going to be a lot more fun. Now, coming up, and it's going to be discussed at the town hall, is changes to Article 2 in the UUA bylaws. I was at the General Assembly last year, and I was not a delegate, but my wife and I still went to the business meetings because that's where stuff gets done. And you can, see it happening, and you can be part of the discussion. You just can't vote. As it turned out, no one could vote at those meetings. It used to be that they would give you a little slip of paper that had your name on it and said that you're registered. And after they would make a suggestion, they'd say, okay, all in favor, hold up. Okay, all opposed, hold up. And, and there would also be some people online, and it would either be, all right, this is an obvious choice, or we'll just do actually do a count going all around the place. Instead, what they did was they said, well, you have until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to cast your votes. Now, when it came to amendments for Article 2, I couldn't tell you how many people got up online and were online saying, I want to make an amendment. I have no idea which ones they actually got a chance to vote on because there were so many, and what they basically said is, look, it's like, for an example, are we going to keep, a lot of people wanted to keep the old principles as part of the bylaws. And, there were so many variations on themes that those people who were going to be voting basically found out what they'd be voting on that night. And so that was how they were going to be doing that. Now, so what were the changes in the bylaws or in Article 2 of UUA's bylaws? I don't know. But that's something that's going to be discussed later. It's another one of those changes.
Craig, for your remarks. Periodically, the UUA thinks about the principles and the beliefs that hold us together as a religious movement and as a denomination. And I believe that at the same time, as I understand Unitarian Universalism, we are free as individuals to develop our own most deeply personal principles and beliefs. But there is this sphere of our common life in which we benefit from this idea that we hold certain things in common with one another. And so to that end, the UUA has recently reworked the basic beliefs that fuel us and that inspire us and that unify us. And I'd like to have 3 members of the congregation at this time come and speak about that. Ruth, could you come up first? And thank you so much to those who will speak today.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Hendry, and I joined the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County in 2009. I am wearing a t-shirt that I bought at General Assembly in June from an Orlando Unitarian Universalist congregation who is courageously fighting to protect its trans youth from the vindictive policies of the governor and legislature of Florida. It says, "My faith is love. UU values protect trans kids." My faith is love. Not a Hallmark movie love, it's a skillful love. It is this love that sustains us during our personal crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Birmingham moments where strength and courage are required. It is what the Reverend Jackie Lewis, senior minister of Middle Church in New York City, calls fierce love, a bold path to ferocious courage and rule-breaking kindness. Reverend Jackie says our world is a hot mess, and that resonates with me. There are 3 things, Craig, that I know with certainty, especially at this time of the hot mess. First, I'm a Unitarian Universalist to the depth of my bones. To me, it is a life-sustaining and life-saving, and it's a life-affirming, life-sustaining, and life-saving faith. The Universalist message of universal love nourishes and sustains me through exhilarating joy and painful loss. Second, change is constant. Every breath brings change, as does every sunrise and sunset. We tend not to notice these changes. Third, change is hard, especially when it's abrupt, undesired, and painful. When change is a global pandemic that kills more than 6 million people worldwide and disrupts every aspect of life as we know it, including how we do church and how we support each other in our congregation, it is especially challenging. Change of this magnitude requires a fierce, bold, life-sustaining love. I joined my first Unitarian Universalist congregation 50 years ago in 1973. The principles were printed on a little red business card that said, freedom, reason, and tolerance. Despite fear that I was a heretic, abandoning my Methodist and Presbyterian roots, I was so excited with what I experienced in church. I was expected to live a life worth dying for, a life that called me to create a just heaven on earth, rather than focus on any heavenly rewards after death. At the 1984-85 Unitarian Universalist General Assemblies, Article 2 was revised to the current principles and sources. Even though I never memorized the 7 principles, not even the kids' version, I strove every day to practice them, including the challenge of acknowledging the worth and dignity of every person. I said yes to the principles wholeheartedly and taught them to my children. Here we are, 30 years later, revising Article 2 per UUA bylaws again, and we're only a decade behind. It makes me feel better as a procrastinator. I am grateful for the leadership of the Reverend Meg Riley, the UUA co-moderator, and Paula Cole-Jones, who was instrumental in bringing forth the 8th principle for their role on the study commission. This Article 2 study commission is benefiting from the wisdom, vision, and leadership of Unitarian Universalists who are the age of my children and grandchildren. At General Assembly last year, I listened to the Article 2 Study Commission's report. I listened as others lamented the loss of their beloved 7 principles and sources. But here's the good news, I think. The UUA is calling us to actively engage in the transformation of our world through liberating love. According to the Commission's revisions, love is the power that holds us together and is the center of our shared values. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Excerpts of the 7 principles appear in the description of our shared values. The vitality of our faith is through transformation. We can adapt to a changing world. Openness to change is fundamental to Unitarian Universalism, never complete and never perfect. We are accountable as congregations and individuals in doing the work our shared values demand through the spiritual discipline of love. Rosemary Bahola Tromer writes of her aging mother's liberating love in this excerpt of her poem on faith. She has been nurtured by a love so great it fuels her from within, regardless of the weather. Love is stored in her, not like the memory of the sun, but like the sun itself still present. Something generous, unstinting, a gravity of praise, a star of wonder, a vigorous blessing, the legacy of faith. It is on this liberating love that James Baldwin writes, "Love takes off the masks we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within." Baldwin also writes, "The longer I live, the more deeply I learn that love, whether we call it friendship or family, romance, is the work of mirroring and magnifying each other's light. Gentle work, steadfast work, life-saving work in those moments when life and shame and sorrow occlude our own light from our view, but there still is a clear-eyed, loving person to beam it back. In our best moments, we are that person for another. In this liberating love, this fierce love that calls us to protect trans kids from the governor of Florida or anywhere else they are at risk of harm. It is this fierce love centered on our shared values we take out into the world with courage and strength. The world desperately needs fierce Unitarian Universalist love and our commitment to it.
I'm David Lehman. Good morning. 2 years ago, I had the privilege of participating with 7 other UUCDC members, including Reverend Peter, in a 10-month discussion of Widening the Circle of Concern, a report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. In reading that book and in deep sharing and wrestling each week or each month with the challenges and the aspirations of a new topic each month, we were reminded again and again about the importance of regularly revitalizing our UUA faith to become a more inclusive and impactful movement and association. Widening the Circle reports on the lived experiences of many UUs of color and the concerns of many other UUs of all shades and identities who wish for a more multicultural and radically inclusive community. The report is a call to empathy and action. Most UUs and most UU congregations in America are white and suburban, with members with lots of degrees. These characteristics affect our lives, our congregational lives, and our presence in the world. Widening the Circle asks, what if we directly faced our limitations, the legacies of white supremacy and heteronormativity and educational elitism? What if we truly wanted and worked to be a congregation, a movement, and an association that looked more like, even more like, the beloved community that Dr. King and other prophets have envisioned? What are we already doing in service to that vision? Many things. What more could we do? As our new UUA president, Sophia Betancourt, wrote in 2018, you remember 2018, a very challenging year in our nation and in our association, she wrote, "We are on a journey toward redemption. We have lived a year filled with lamentation. With the strength of generations, the failures of the everyday, and the deep down gritty messiness that is the promise of our salvation. There is inherent goodness that exists between and among us. I want to honor that weary, ragged miracle that is our living tradition." So sometime after finishing Widening the Circle, I read the proposed new Article 2, and I was struck by how powerfully it reflected the call of Widening the Circle to revitalize our movement around radical inclusion. At the same time, I was impressed with how the revised Article 2 remains anchored in UU traditions. I like the way the new Article 2 crystallizes our UU values into single words emanating, I don't have a jet pick here, but you see this, emanating from the chalice of love. The spirit and much of the substance of the 7 principles is present in the new Article 2, but in a form that might speak more effectively to a new generation and to all those folks out there who are Unitarian Universalists, but they just don't know it yet. The spirit of the 8th principle, a principle that our congregation passed a few years ago, a principle that names our faith's commitment to racial justice and equity for all, it's now centered in Article 2. As I listened to the conversations about the proposed new Article 2 at UUA General Assembly in Portland, Oregon in 2022, and again at GA in Pittsburgh last summer, I was impressed with how the Article 2 Study Commission responded to questions and supported still a few more revisions to the evolving document. The new Article 2 is a community-deliberated synthesis of tradition and innovation, of continuity and revitalization. I was thrilled to be a participating witness on that Saturday and Sunday morning in Pittsburgh last June to the overwhelming vote of the assembled, affirming the Article 2 revision process and eventual outcome. I feel fortunate. you may too. I believe we all are fortunate to be part of a movement that aims so high in our work to transform ourselves and to save the world. Repeating the words of Sophia Betancourt, I want to honor the weary, ragged miracle that is our living tradition.
Hi, I'm Jody Malloy. I've been a member of UUCDC for 27 years, and I'm also the executive director of the Church of the Larger Fellowship Unitarian Universalist, which is the largest Unitarian Universalist church. I've attended 16 of the past 17 General Assemblies. The General Assembly is the annual meeting of Unitarian Universalist congregations. I am very involved with our larger faith. But I didn't start out that way. 27 years ago, I came to UUCDC not knowing much of anything about Unitarian Universalism. At that time, there were two things that spoke to me most about Unitarian Universalism. The first was that Unitarian Universalism embraced change. The starting point for this faith was that we are all on a journey, and we would change over time. What I believe today might not be what I believe tomorrow. And that was not only okay, that was what I should be doing. What this faith asked of me was to continue to learn and grow, and to do that intentionally. This foundation of our faith is built into the bylaws of our Association of Congregations. The Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, bylaws say we are to examine our purposes and principles, Article 2, every 15 years. What is different about our faith is that we don't have a creed. As a minister friend of mine said, UUs believe that revelation is not sealed. It is not static. Having a process to revisit periodically what we value is an integral part of who we are. Holding on to the same principles forever is creating a creed. So when it was pointed out to me that our current purposes and principles, our current Article 2, is from 1985, even though those purposes and principles are the ones I learned as I embrace this faith, and even though, honestly, I will grieve the loss of the principles that I became a Unitarian Universalist with and are so familiar to me, even though I still thought about how much I've changed since 1985, and that I didn't want a creed. And I welcome the exploration of how we might express our faith today. I'm very appreciative of the year's worth of work that our Article 2 Commission has done to talk to UUs all over and use their input to develop a new articulation of our purposes and principles that reflects where we are collectively today on this journey together as a faith. I love the new proposed Article 2. I love that our values are expressed in concepts and not phrases. I don't know about you, but even after 27 years, I can't recite the 1985 7 principles. I love that we are articulating who we are and what we believe as values. The principles are specific enough that they are guiding and expansive enough that they invite us to bring in our own experiences and what we aspire to make the world a better place. I love that the new Article 2 centers love. If I were to write my own credo, like we asked the coming of age students to do, I would start with, I believe in the transforming power of love. And the values that surround love in the Article 2 diagram, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, independence, and generosity, JETPIG. Think about it. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, JETPIG. Yes, there are UUs across the country embracing the acronym JETPIG, and all the wonderful visuals that can accompany that. I've seen cartoons, drawings, stuffed animals, but seriously, I love visuals. I love the flower diagram. For me, it is so much more accessible than just words. The proposed principles are expressed in a manner that appeals to multiple modalities of learning. They are inclusive. A few years ago, we, the members of UUCDC, passed an 8th principle. We were not alone. Many congregations have passed the 8th principle. We recognized that the 7 principles were missing something, and we voted to add an 8th principle, which stated that actively participating in anti-racism work was part of who we are. I love that these new principles don't just add that, but lift it up in that it will take all of our values to dismantle racism and oppression, that working to end oppression in all its forms, racism, sexism, classism, that working for liberation for all stems from all of our values: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, generosity, JETPIG. I mentioned that when I became a UU, there were 2 aspects of Unitarian Universalism that really spoke to me. In addition to lifting up the journey, I also fell in love with a faith that was centered around the inherent worth and dignity of everyone. I was so proud to be part of a faith that espoused that. The thing is, on my journey, I've come to realize that just believing with my whole heart that all folks are worthy is not enough. That the next step is declaring that if all folks are worthy, then there should be justice and equity for everyone. That I need to work for equity for all. The proposed new Article 2 says that. It says exactly that. It moves beyond declaration to action. This is an example of the transformation that I believe our principles needed, and that change is part of the proposed principles. My faith asked me to embrace transformation. I did. Now it's time for our guiding principles to reflect that change. I'm hanging out with the JETPIG.
I would like to thank our speakers today, both present and far away, for the beautiful and moving remarks you gave and blessed us all with your thoughtfulness and care.